I think the main value that we have as we grow in our careers is having the right answers, knowing the right things, getting things done, all that stuff. And that's where our value, we start to realize I have value because I'm a problem fixer and
Right.
I'm fast. That's my value. And then when things start to change and that stuff doesn't work anymore, we go, well, where's my value then?
Welcome to Evolve, a new era of leadership. I'm your host, Carolyn Swora. Today we are going to be talking with Aneace Haddad. Aneace is a seasoned C-suite executive coach and McKinsey certified senior advisor. He has worked as a leadership coach with executive teams for hours and hours and hours. He's worked with over 100 top teams across 15 diverse industries globally. And before that, he had his own business. So I am really excited to talk with Aneace about leadership, about what he's learned, and what contributed to these two books that he's written about leadership and really what midlife brings to our ability to lead. I'm looking forward to this conversation. Well, Evolve listeners, welcome to another episode. And I'm really, really excited to be talking to this amazing leader on the other side of the world. We've got a 12-hour time zone difference going on here. And Aneace Haddad, thank you so much for coming onto the show and welcome.
Thank you, Carolyn. Wonderful being here. Wonderful meeting you.
Yeah, I was saying before we pressed record, you can tell me what tomorrow is going to be like. And you said there was going to be some nice weather in store. So I'm going to make sure I pull my tank top out for that.
So based on my experience, yes, you will experience equatorial temperatures and
Love
humidity. So yeah, that's how today looks.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, before I get to tomorrow and you end today, I would love to have a conversation about all of this great work that you have done in the leadership space. There's a depth to your work, Aneace, that I found really appealing and I think will really appeal to our listeners. And so I'm just going to start off sort of big picture first is what drew you to do work in the leadership space? Why is that a place that you want to give back to?
I was a programmer when I started my career. So I'm a techie from the beginning. And then I became a tech entrepreneur. I built a payment software company in France where I was living at the time in the south of France, grew it to 30 countries,
Wow.
and then sold it in 2007 when I was 47. And I mean, I knew about midlife crises and things like that, but I was in the middle of everything at the time. So I didn't really look at it from that perspective. Didn't have the depth, I don't think.
Yet.
And
you didn't have it yet.
Yeah. So going through that whole process, so I sold my company, was getting a divorce, moving from France to Singapore. I'd been in France almost 20 years, originally from the US, but I've spoken French since I was a kid, and it was always supposed to be home. And then things turned out differently. Business led me in other places, and I was moving to Singapore. So there was a lot of change going on. I thought I was going to be a serial entrepreneur because I thought there's nothing else I know how to do in life. I've built a company. It was successful. It was relatively successful. We had a good exit, but it was a niche company. It wasn't like one of these big ones that you hear about today. But then I discovered my heart wasn't in it anymore. And I really struggled for a couple of years. And I found that whenever I would talk to people that used to work for me and went on to become CEOs, CTOs, CFOs of other companies, I always found that was a lot more fulfilling. I had a lot more pride in that than in the company, the technology, the patents. I had written the patents and filed them myself. But I had much more pride in the people. So I did some leadership training courses where I was a participant, trying to understand what are the things I could have done differently in the past. And that quickly led into the work that I'm doing today. So by 50, I had transitioned into executive coaching, top team facilitation. And now when I look backwards, I see that that is that midlife crucible that many of us go through, where we start
Mm,
questioning things. What's my purpose? What more do I want out of life? I've still got
right.
lots of years ahead of me. What am I going to do with them? The things that were driving me before are not driving me in the same way. That's what I write about today, and that's what I love the most. A year ago, I made the conscious decision to stop coaching people under 40.
Oh,
And and I don't want that to sound like reverse ageist or anything. It's just that there's something so amazing that happens in that time period, 40s and 50s, that I really love. So focusing only on that, I think, has allowed me to go into more depth on that transformation.
well, if I listen to what you said about your company, you said that it was a niche service or a niche product. And so I'm hearing you say that this is niche coaching. And I think it's brilliant
Yeah,
because when you're really clear at who your target is, you can really go to that depth. So I fall
yeah.
into your category. Maybe that's why I loved your profile so much. She's like, okay, I'm over 40. I might even be over 50. So I am. I mean, let's face it. By the time this airs, I will have had my 52nd birthday. But
Okay. Well,
I have
congratulations.
found,
Happy birthday
thank
coming up
you.
soon.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm loving my 50s. I mean, to me, there is, like you said, there's just a blend. There's sort of this connection of I've got time to still do some things and leave a legacy. And I've got some experience that's really informed that and made me much wiser.
Yeah.
So Aneace, I know you wrote a book about an eagle and a hummingbird, and there was some nectar involved, right? The eagle that drank the
Yes,
hummingbird's
there
nectar.
always is.
What was the premise of that book, and how does it tie in? Because it's a fable, I know. And
Yeah.
sort of what's the message for leaders in their 40s and 50s, or maybe even beyond that, that book talks about?
So that book, I had written two traditional business books back 20 something years ago when I was running my payment software company. So they were payment oriented books. And I wanted to write again when I moved into this new work that I've been doing now 15 years. It still feels new. But I didn't want it to be a traditional business book because there's so many of them out there on leadership and everything. So I made it as a novel. It was a very difficult process. I had three, four different writing coaches that worked with me over
Wow.
a few years. And I remember one in particular that kept telling me, you're teaching again, because my
Mm,
voice would sound very professorial and teaching, giving advice. So I had to really take that out, which has served me in my coaching because that it's the same kind of thing. The premise was actually my own transition at 50, but totally fictionalized. So it allowed me to go deeper in areas, embellish areas, create a narrative around the transformation that at the end of the day really matches my own transformation in terms of events by maybe 20%, 25%. The vast majority are things that are worked around that. The premise is, well, number one, choosing to move forward in that new phase of life rather than holding on to the past. And
mm,
usually that comes when we don't have any other choice. Things are just
yeah.
falling apart. And we finally go, okay, I got to do something different now. So
Yeah.
that's the first chapter of the book, is how he deals with that. And then there are subsequent chapters of depth. One of them is beginning to look at one's own biases, limiting beliefs, things like that, and seeing them, but not seeing them in a negative fashion, looking at them as something beautiful in terms of being human, because it's the way our brains work, but at the same time
Mm,
can be limiting. And then how do we grow with them, transcend them? The next chapter is on letting go of identities, of labels. So we build up all these labels
mm,
over the years. I'm a man, a father, an expat in Singapore, former tech CEO, blah, blah, blah. We have got dozens, hundreds of these labels,
Right.
and they're shortcuts in thinking, but sometimes they hold us back because we start really getting rigidly fixed with those labels. So
We
the idea is
do.
to
Yeah.
loosen them up a bit and see that even though we have these labels, that I'm still something else. I'm not just my labels. And I
Right.
can let go of these labels and I still have value. So that's a letting go process that I see a lot in midlife. Letting go of control, that's a big one.
Yeah.
Uh,
Or letting
allowing
go of
things.
perceived control, because we've never really had it. We just
Yeah,
think we have. Yeah,
yeah, and it feels good. And
it does.
we got all the spreadsheets and everything that show that we really master the next 5 years, and this is how it's going to be. And then a pandemic hits, and all those things are out the door.
Yeah.
So that was the premise, but all done as a novel through the eyes of the protagonist who is going through that transformation at 50.
And how does this help a leader? So, why would a leader around this age group want to read this book? What's it going to help them do better or be better at?
The huge shift, in my opinion, from just under that age group to this age group is that under that age group, we thrive on how-to kind of advice. So we want lists. Here are 5 bullet points of what we need to do to get ahead.
Boom, boom, boom.
And
Yeah.
it serves very well for that period. But in this messy process, I don't believe that's very useful because it maintains a sense of control. Somebody tell me, it's also disempowering. Tell me what to do. Let me do it so I
Right.
can get through to the next phase. So
Yeah.
the purpose of this book is to go deeper and begin noticing through stories of others, begin noticing how my life, is also changing. So it's a different kind of learning than teaching learning. It's fiction. Fiction is a fantastic way for this kind of thing to come through. There's also an underlying current that only gets revealed at the very end, which reveals a thread of grief throughout the book, which is never mentioned. So we talked about trauma a moment ago
Yeah.
before we started. We all have elements of that, but without even mentioning the word, it can come through. So that was a lot of fun when that came together as kind of the final reveal of something that was underlying. And it gives the book a whole other sense that wasn't really talked about directly.
What happens when leaders carry unknown or unresolved grief in them? How does that show up in their leadership?
I can give you an example recently. Chief operating officer of a large company. I was working with the top team. We had a session, a 1-day session, 1.5-day session with the top team, 15 people. He was extremely frustrated with how people weren't moving ahead. And things were not going to plan, and they weren't doing what he wanted them to do, the top team. And then it became evident in one sharing moment when there was vulnerability in the room. His daughter was 18. She was about to go away to college. They lived in Singapore. The family lived in Singapore, and he was elsewhere. He was traveling around Southeast Asia and had missed seeing her growing up like that and getting ready to leave. And now, as she was about to leave, he shared how she would never live with him again. And he was emotional. And what hit me at that moment is that he was taking out that frustration on the people around him. Like, I can't be with my daughter and I have to be with you idiots.
Right. How did that show up in his behaviors with the team? Was he short with them? Did he yell at them, or did he ignore them? Like, how did it show up?
He would get very rigid and tense with them and demanding and micromanaging. And I've kind of conflated. I've seen that in several different people. So that's the way I normally see that kind of frustration come through. It comes out, it doesn't come out, well, I'm sure it does at times. I don't often see it come out in like really shouting kind of session, especially in Asia. People are a bit more careful with that. However, it comes out, it can be a bit more subtle, but the tenseness is really felt. And so it creates tenseness around everyone else. And once he was able to see that and have a bit of a laugh about it, it eased things up. A lot of things changed for him over the following weeks with that. What I don't know, but what I suspect and what I hope for him is that it also, by letting go, by not holding so tightly on this thing of, I will never have my daughter at home again, I'm missing the last moments with her as she grows up and leaves. I'm hoping that by loosening his grip on that, he can start to envision a different kind of future reality with her, visiting her more often, traveling. So it's that transition which we all go through as our kids grow up. We all go through that, and it just comes out in different ways.
You know, before the pandemic, I don't remember reading or seeing much about grief in leadership literature or work. And since the pandemic, though, there's definitely more written about that. I'm curious what your perspective is on the reality of our workplaces, which, you know, just sort of, if I really generalize it, people feel more lonely, they feel more separate, there's just a lot more disconnection, a lot more shortness. Do you think that there's grief at the sort of cause, or I don't want to say cause, but do you think grief is causing some of this?
Yeah, and for me, the word grief is anyway, it's a loss of something.
Right.
In the traditional sense, a loss of a loved one, but it's also loss of an identity, loss of a label. Something has changed, and that can feel very much like the loss of a loved one. Loss of certainty. I think one of the biggest things with the pandemic is, on a massive scale, we've all experienced loss of certainty. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know where we're going. And still, we need to be able to live and find joy and all that. So I see the same thing you've seen. There were two top team retreats that I did, not this one that I was just talking about, two other top team retreats that I did soon after the reopening, after COVID, within a couple of weeks of each other. And this is the CEO and the top. There were small teams, 6, 7, 8 people. And even though there were interviews before doing the retreat and in order to design the retreat and all that for them, still organizational grief and trauma came up in both of those situations, which had not been surfaced or raised before. And once it came out, it was able to be talked about and things were worked through. There are things that work through pretty quickly once they come out. I was struck by how those came out in such similar ways in completely different companies and completely different countries. And the only thing I can see in common is something with the pandemic having put us into a deeper mode.
Yeah. Is there something you could share about what organizational grief looks like sort of a topic or a theme? I haven't heard many people mention that before in that way.
So many things happen in organizations that create lingering frustration and grief. Mergers, acquisitions, top battles between very senior people, and one of them loses out and leaves the company. A major project that was the brainchild of one of the founders, and the project fails and gets cut and the founder has to leave. And the people that were behind that are upset, and the others that remain, the others that were outside of it, feel grief, feel trauma from how, in some cases that I've seen, it's the people that were there, the legacy people, were being treated like they were old and not old age-wise, but they didn't have anything new to offer, and we were going to modernize this company and change everything, and then it didn't work the way it was planned. And the people that had been kind of beat up as being irrelevant are struggling to refine their relevance. Right. So it comes up in many, many different ways. And the most effective way I've seen of dealing with all this is having frank, open, courageous conversations that
Right.
you're certified in Dare to Lead.
I am. Yeah. So when you say surface tension and have difficult conversations, I'm like, ding, ding,
Yeah,
ding. Yes.
yeah,
And
that's
you know,
exactly it.
what I find interesting about just the year 2020, I mean, lots happened in that year. It sort of like took this band-aid over this off of this big gaping wound. I mean, the band-aid was just really sort of a surface. And these things were there before, right? You and I have both seen companies and leaders go through mergers and acquisitions and transformations and all that. I think what was interesting about 2020 is there was no place for the pain or the grief, or there was no place to silence any of those emotions. And it has to come out now. And we have to have these conversations. We have to surface these tensions because, as you said, there's a loss of certainty, and we just don't have a choice anymore. Are you seeing that with leaders too?
Yeah,
Like you cannot be a leader today, an effective leader, without navigating uncertainty.
yeah. There's an exercise I've done a few times is having people say, I don't know an answer to every question. And it's a challenging exercise. A lot of there are people that really struggle with, I don't know.
What's the purpose of the exercise?
It's to start noticing how we feel that we want to know everything. We want to have answers to everything. Pre midlife, I think the main value that we have as we grow in our careers is having the right answers, knowing the right things, getting things done, all that stuff. And that's where our value, we start to realize I have value because I'm a problem fixer and
Right.
I'm fast. That's my value. And then when things start to change and that stuff doesn't work anymore, we go, well, where's my value then? Every parent experiences that as kids grow up in teenage years and then they get ready to leave. It's like, well, if you don't want me to tell you what to do, what's my value as a parent?
Right.
I'm your parent. It's my role to tell you what to do. Trying to hold on to something. That was an early fascinating thing I found in my coaching was our parenting stage kind of mirrors our leadership stage. Um,
Mm.
when you see slightly younger leaders in the organization, their kids are a bit younger. CEOs, they tend to have teenagers or late teens even.
Yep.
Board members, their kids have just grown up and left. And the level of trust and empowerment and level of comfort, which takes quite a lot of time to develop, but level of comfort of saying, okay, do your thing. Do your thing. I
Mm.
trust that you're going in the right direction. I don't agree maybe with how you're doing it, but do your thing. That comfort level goes up. And I see midlife as a perfect storm for accelerating that process because so many things, our bodies are changing. It's just not
Yeah.
responding the way it used to. I don't have the stamina. Our brains are changing. We're forgetting where our car keys were. We look at a spreadsheet. We're talking to the board. We're looking at the spreadsheet and we can't remember what the formula was behind one of the cells where we used to know it
Right.
all. And our kids are growing up and leaving home. And behind all of this, I find amazing opportunities for growth and for learning and for moving into wisdom, as you mentioned earlier. So, yeah,
Wow. And so, what I'd never thought of that parental, I mean, I know it's there, but I just appreciated how you just outlined that. Like board members are typically at a different point in their career. Kids will be older. They've seen a lot more, they've experienced a lot more. And it's really interesting. So I guess like with all your years of experience, can you sort of see the leadership style and have a good
yeah,
sense at the parenting style that goes along with it?
yeah. If I see an organization with lots of smallish KPIs and requirements and stuff like that, I know there are a lot of small children at home. especially in the
Mm,
HR department. They still have a lot of kids at home, and they're kind of bringing that same energy in. So things like a doctor's certificate, a doctor's letter saying that you really are sick, stuff like that. If someone is working from home, are they really working? What can we put on their computers to make sure that they're really attentive? That all those kinds of things, that kind of thinking. I know there are a lot of kids that are still at home in the organization. That's the style of it. Or top down. Here are our values. Learn them rather than surfacing it, bringing it up from
right,
the people and then adopting it. I'm at the top. Okay, oh, those are our values. Cool. Okay, I'm going to adapt to those values. It's a
right.
it's a very different kind of energy.
Once you get through the teenage years, you know damn well you don't
You
know it
don't know
all.
best.
Sometimes you don't think you know anything, but hey, that's a whole other podcast. So the sense I'm getting, so I want to sort of maybe not untie, but dig in a little bit deeper. Are we saying that great CEOs have to be over 50? Why or why not?
No, I know people under 40 that are exemplary and that have gone way beyond all of these things. But I think it's a very rare characteristic. If
Hmm.
you look at the leadership literature, Robert Keegan, who talks about the 5 levels and all that, Jim Collins, their top level, the way they describe it is it's extremely rare. The top level,
Mm,
Keegan talks about 1% of people reach that top level of consciousness. Now, when you look at the age of these particular writers, when they came up with their theories, when I did some research on that, they were all in their mid 30s. And I
hmm,
believe it is rare earlier on, but I believe it's there. I think it's very
right.
possible, and we see them. What I really think, it's not so much that you have to be over 50. What I think is that in midlife, those qualities become less rare. I think in midlife,
Mm,
there's an opportunity for them to emerge kind of naturally because of all the stuff that we're going through. For example, Jim Collins, his top level is humility and iron will, having those
yep,
two together, which is quite rare. Over 50, it's a lot more rare. I mean, a lot less rare. There are a lot more
yep.
people that have humility and iron will because there's so many things that have not gone the way they thought they would go. So, in answer to your question, it's totally possible to have great CEOs well under 50, but the potential grows a lot in midlife.
Hmm. If we let
Yeah.
go. What's the impact on the team when a CEO does this work to, I'm just going to use, you haven't used this word yet necessarily, but like deepens their level of consciousness or raises their
Yeah.
level of consciousness? What's the impact on their team when that happens?
The fundamental one is trust. And if you're familiar with Patrick Lencioni's 5 dysfunctions of a team, his pyramid, trust
Yep.
is the foundational of that one. And that's usually the area that I work on the most with top teams. As soon as very senior leaders start, they shift. They go from a process of saying something like, it's hard to do this just audio. We need to change and pointing at everybody else. Hey guys,
Yep.
everybody, we need to change. But the message underneath it is you need to change. And that's a very, very common message. Now, when the shift comes from, I need to change how I'm doing stuff. I'm the source of everything that's happening here. I take full responsibility for it. How am I creating distrust in the organization? I want greater empowerment. I want people to take more initiative. What am I doing that's sending messages to dampen that? And if I
Mm,
start searching on those things and I find them, and they can be extremely subtle things, then things shift and trust increases. So that's the main thing is that trust amongst the team raises and
yeah.
we get more things done because we're not constantly doubting each other.
It's, isn't it amazing when a senior leader has that revelation?
It's quite beautiful. It's quite beautiful
Yeah.
when that shift happens.
Because it's not, it's not for us as coaches or consultants to teach or tell, right? Like
No.
that's not where you see the big shifts. Yeah, it really, I just had a few images there as you said that, and inside I'm sure that the client saw the big smile on my face. It's like, yes, hello, welcome. Or I'm sure the same has happened with me as I've been through my own sort of a journey into deepening or elevating my levels of consciousness too, kind of inviting in the other side and recognizing like there is a side that I haven't seen, and it's about time we got to know this person because she's holding you back.
Do you have a story with a client that you could share right now? I'd love to hear.
Yeah, it's probably similar to what you said, Aneace, where the revelation turns from we need to be doing this, but the we is sort of, it doesn't, the words aren't aligning with the felt sense.
Yeah.
And underneath it's like, oh no, they need to be the ones, like, I know where I'm taking this, but they need to be the ones to follow.
Yeah.
Versus, and this doesn't happen overnight, but this revelation of, wow, I'm realizing XYZ, and like really identifying some of the things in themselves and then asking questions. I can think of one person that asked me straight up, is this what's happening on the team because I'm doing XYZ?
Oh, wow.
And that was like, yeah, it could be a contributing factor. I'm not the knower of all things, but that's a great question to ask. And then I just found the questions and the desire to know more about themselves just deepened.
Yeah, that's
And you don't have to
beautiful.
ask them to do anything. It becomes this
Yeah.
place where they want to go.
That brings to mind a story that's in my book that comes from an early coaching session I had. The managing director of a textile factory in India, they were having too many accidents and they had some fatalities. And I don't know anything about factories or safety or anything like that, so I wasn't coaching him on that. But well, we got into a conversation, and then I asked him. I love using 1 to 10, especially with senior executives, because they love to take these very mushy things and put them into some way that they can kind of measure them. So I asked him from 1 to 10, how committed are you to safety? And he
Mm-hmm.
said very, very high, 9 out of 10. And then the conversation quickly moved toward maybe that's why people are dying if it's not 10. There's something he's feeling that was off. But then he got angry. He said, I can't be 10 out of 10 safety. I've got thousands of people. Most of them are uneducated. They do stupid things. The shop floor is very long. If a forklift is going by and somebody wants to get from one end to the other, he'll jump on the front of the forklift. He knows he's not supposed to. I can't be on everybody's back. That was
Right.
his definition of 10 out of 10. I backed off because he was angry and was like, okay, I get it. I don't know anything about your factory.
Right.
And then at our next coaching session, he was really excited. He says, I found my 10 out of 10. He says he told me a story. He was walking through the shop floor. There was a janitor, elderly janitor, who slipped, twisted his ankle, and the CEO, the managing director, stopped and helped him. And he called the health and safety people, come down and make sure he was okay. And he said, up until then, that's 9 out of 10. That's what I would have always done. If I was walking by and something happened, I would have stopped and checked on them. Then he said, as he was searching for what is more, what's missing, when the safety people said the man was okay, he just needed to go back to his home and rest and not walk on his foot for a couple of days, the CEO said he decided to drive him home in his car. And so he personally drove the man home. He helped him into the house, met his wife, made sure the wife would make sure that the man stays in bed for a couple of days. He had tea with them. And it was this level of empathy, of connecting with others as human beings,
Mm.
that just took it a notch higher.
Yeah.
And people talk. I mean, hey, did you see that? The CEO took the janitor home in his own car. People talk about it, and the commitment goes up. So I never would have been saying, I'd never been, it would have been able to say, hey, if you see someone fall down, put them in your car and drive them. It's not that. It's
Right.
really for him to
Yeah.
find what is missing. And for him, what was missing is that extra level of empathy and human connection.
What a fabulous story. And I mean, it just takes it to a whole other level. Like you said, you can't write that out and prescribe it. It just came from a different place for this leader.
Yeah. So
Wow.
I've never been a big, how to put it, stickler on 10 out of 10 commitment, that kind of thing, until that story. And now I use it
Yeah.
all the time. And when I have a group, I have a team of leaders. I'll have them use a flip chart, put a red dot on where you see yourself today as a team in terms of effectiveness from 1 to 10. The dots are
Yep.
usually 4 to 7. Where do you need to
Yep.
be? People will put 8, 9, 10. And then we have a big
Mm,
conversation on, okay, everyone in the room sees that your effective needs to go up. Got it. And we start unpacking why are people seeing things differently and all that. And then the final unpacking is why not 10 out of 10? And you have a few people that put 10 out of 10 dots. They're completely on board. The others, all the same conversations come up over and over again. 10 out of 10 is perfection. It means that I can't grow anymore. So it's good not to be 10 out of 10. And it always
mm.
goes in that direction. And then I'll drop at the end of it a little story. I'll say, remember when your baby, when you first became a father or a mother, and you're holding your baby in your hands, and you say, I love you 7 out of 10. I know that I'm not, I know that I don't know how to be a parent yet. I don't know who you are, what you're going to grow into. 7 out of 10 feels about
Ah,
right now. And it might reach 8 or 9. And we don't think like that. We don't think like that.
we
So that always
don't.
gets
What?
everybody laughing and they get it.
Oh my, that is such a brilliant way to describe that. Cool. Well, Aneace, like we've already been talking here. We have to start into the wrap up side of things. I'm kind of sad by
We could
that.
go on and on.
We could. You're going to teach me all these things. I just want to give you a moment to share a little bit about your new book coming out later, I think this spring, correct?
Yep. So the new book is titled Soaring Beyond Midlife, the surprisingly natural emergence of leadership superpowers in life's second half. So
Mm.
it takes the themes of the novel, but it places them into a larger context of multiple protagonists, stories that they're going through, and it unpacks what I call the 3 winds of change of midlife. The physiological changes we go through, the neurological changes. I mentioned earlier, not remembering car keys, but we also have
Yep.
our 2 hemispheres that are connecting more. So we're able to connect the dots in an
Mm,
easier way than when we were younger. And the
right.
third area is parental change. So the kids growing up, leaving home, and how that's impacting us. And in my opinion, the premise of the book is that this gives rise to leadership superpowers like humility and iron will. So there are a variety. There's several of these that come through that are directly impacted by those 3 changes. It's a fleshing out of this idea that midlife is an amazing crucible for nurturing exemplary leadership qualities. If we're able to let go of what has served us
In the
previously and
past.
explore in depth what the future is going to look like.
Do you know what else I think it does too? Is it helps us move into this phase of our lives with excitement, with
Yeah,
gratitude versus like, oh, I can't believe I'm so old. Or I
yeah,
can't tell you how many people like, oh, well, you're in your 50s, you're closer to the door now. I'm like, well, yeah, you're
yeah.
closer to walk
No
out the door
way.
if you want to. But it's so, and it makes me sad, that people view getting older as a punishment or as,
Yeah.
something that we're suffering. So I'm really excited to get my hands on this book when it comes out, Aneace. Where could people find out more about it? Can they do pre-orders?
They will be able to do pre orders probably mid May. is when the
All right.
pre-orders would open up. It'll all be on Amazon, easy to find.
All right.
There'll be
Sounds
print
good.
versions, Kindle, ebook versions. The prior novel is also on audio. I hired a voice actor because there were several different characters. It wasn't just one voice. There were different
Oh,
characters.
cool.
This one is not yet in audio. It would be a more traditional one, and maybe I'll narrate this next one. But yeah, it'll all be on Amazon. Pretty easy to find.
Fantastic. Well, we will make sure that those links are in the show notes. If you do an audio version, I'm going to pass on a little secret that somebody shared with me is to drink apple juice while you record.
Really?
Yep.
What does that
I
do
did
for your
mine.
throat, or?
It does something for your throat. I don't know if it's like true what it actually does scientifically, but we'll just say it's, a little wisdom. It worked for me. I mean, my throat never went dry. I didn't cough and, just always had my apple juice. A good friend of mine has a recording studio. So I recorded my book at his studio and I would show up every day with my little liter of apple juice. So there you go.
So you narrated your own book. How many hours was it?
It was probably how many chapters? 12 chapters, an hour and two, like probably 24 hours in total. Like by the
Right.
time you
Okay.
got through everything. Yeah. Once you get a rhythm, it's good and you can't do too much at once. Like I really noticed anyway, I would get tired and then my intonation or, sometimes I might be
Oh, yeah.
flatter. So there was really, I couldn't power through. I couldn't maintain the same level of energy.
Right. Right.
So
We can go on and on in this
we
conversation. There's so many other
could. Yes,
questions I
we just changed the whole topic of the podcast there for a second. Well, Aneace, before we sign off and you continue into tomorrow and I will finish off today, can I ask you the 3 questions I ask all our listeners or I
Yes.
ask all of my
Yes.
guests? All right. So the first question is about self-awareness and just would invite you to share a short anecdote or a lesson that you learned that really took your level of self-awareness to a whole other level.
It was kind of the event that sent me into this work when just after I had sold my company, I was doing a leadership training. It was a ropes course, where you're up in the trees and you've got the ropes and everything.
Yeah.
And I was paired in one exercise. I was paired with a young woman who is scared of heights. And in this particular exercise, you go up to the top and there's a rickety bridge in front with pieces of wood missing. And one of you is supposed to put a mask on, a blindfold. So the facilitator told me to put the blindfold on. And so I did. So basically, I was supposed to allow my partner to lead me across and experience that. And she froze. She didn't want to move. She was paralyzed. And I was encouraging her, come on, let's go, let's go. And then my type A personality kicked in. And I thought, okay, well, the goal is to get to the other side. That's the goal. So I had kind of, in my mind, put aside all the other learning things. And so I told her, "What? You get behind me. I'll keep the mask on. That's the rule of the game." And she came behind me. She held my straps, and I felt my way across without us slipping or anything. And I was really proud.
Yeah.
And the facilitator glared at me when I came down. She said, "What the hell was that about?" And she said, "You wasted the opportunity to experience what it feels like to truly trust someone else, and you wasted her opportunity to find her own courage." And that hit me so hard. It took my understanding of empowerment to a much, much higher level. And I realized that I came up with the term courage vampire. This tendency, if people are not showing up courageous, show up. Then my courage would come up to kind of fill the gap.
Pull you along. Yeah.
And pull me along and inhibit. It doesn't demand that their courage come up. That was quite a deep thing for me, that one.
Wow.
That was a long answer to your one question.
No, it was a great answer. It's like you were a courage vampire. We don't want courage vampires.
Yeah.
We want courage, but not the vampire. All right.
Yeah.
So, second question is about how you regulate or how you can bring yourself into a place of calm or presence. What cues or rituals, what strategies do you have that help you?
Oh, mindfulness is a huge one. I meditate every day, at least an hour a day. Mindful moments while listening to people. So mindfulness is a huge one, with physical exercise at least 3 times a week, walking in between, having a lot of
Mm,
movement.
yeah,
Without that, everything just gets very stale, very, very stuck for
it
me. I need
does.
that.
Yep.
I need that.
Nice. And what's a mindful moment? When you said that you have mindful moments listening to people. What do you mean by that?
Focusing entirely on the person, noticing when my thoughts have gone into areas that are unrelated to the person, noticing when my emotions or physical sensations have shifted. And in a coaching conversation, being mindful of when those physical shifts are my own and when I may be mirroring something that I'm sensing in the other person. And then when I bring it
Mm.
out and it says, it feels like my chest is constricted or something, and the other person, if they say, yeah, that's how I feel, then you know you've touched on something deep. So that, I guess that's a super mindful moment. The other kinds of
Well,
mindful moments is just noticing.
I'm hearing attunement, and it's a beautiful, I think, segue into the third question, which is around co regulation. And what you were just describing there is like co-regulating with somebody through attunement. So one of the things that I think helps co-regulate is music. You know, music is such a way that we can bond and stay connected or be connected with each other. So I'm curious what genre of music or song helps you feel connected to something bigger than yourself.
I think through my work, this high level of attunement, empathy, and all that has made loud noises very, very difficult for me, or crowds have become a lot more difficult
Mm,
for me. If I'm
yeah.
out and there are noises, if we're in a restaurant and noises are bouncing everywhere and I can't focus on my wife speaking, when I focus, everything comes in at the same level because I'm not tuning out the way I used to. It's like, so because of that, I haven't been able for the last few years to listen to music with lyrics, for example,
Mm,
because there's too much going on, too much
right.
input. So I love chillax kind of music.
Mm,
That's just, yeah, it's just kind of background music. I'm not really
nice.
good at that. And my wife just went out. My wife and son went out to a Bruno Mars concert, and my stepdaughter the day before, and I can't go to those anymore,
Mm. Well,
unfortunately.
you
So
know,
it feels a
there's
bit,
all types of music, and like you said, the chillax or the I guess I'm gonna guess there's a frequency of sound that isn't doesn't
yeah,
aggravate the auditory capacity that you have.
yeah.
Yeah.
So music, I loved music earlier. I used to like playing the guitar, but
Mm.
I just can't. It doesn't work anymore. So.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing chillax. So we're gonna go look at those up in our music platforms and see what comes up with chillax, because I guarantee you there's gonna be some sort of playlist to go with chillax.
There are. I've listened to many of them.
Yeah, yeah. So, Aneace, thank you so much for coming on the show. We're going to make sure that folks have your links. Really quickly, though, where could people find you?
So my first name is quite unique, especially in the spelling, Aneace.
Yep.
And my website is simply aneace.com, aneace.com. That's kind of the easiest place. And then I'm on LinkedIn. I'm easy to find because my name, you just put in Aneace,
And then
Aneace,
there
and
you
I'm
go.
quite easy to find.
It's like Cher. It's like Cher and Madonna. You're just what, or more Madonna, the soccer player, right? Like you're the one where
Beyonce, Madonna, yeah, lots of.
exactly. There you go. There you go. You're among royalty, Aneace. Well, it's been such a pleasure speaking with you. I know that our listeners here have just gleaned some really fabulous insight. Good luck with your book launch, and it's been a pleasure
Thank
speaking
you.
with you.
Thank you, Carolyn. Wonderful meeting you.
Well, I've learned a new term. I mean, I learned a lot of things in this conversation, but this term of courage vampire, I'm going to sit with that for a while, especially given the amount of work that I do in the space of courageous conversations and courage and vulnerability. It made me wonder times when I might have been a courage vampire, when I have stepped in to try and fix something and not allowed the person or people I'm working with to step into some of that discomfort and learn how to embody courage. That's just one of the things I took away from the conversation with Aneace. I'd love to hear what you took away from this conversation. Send me a message, Carolyn@carolinswora.com. Leave a comment or a rating. Would love to hear what you thought of the show. Thanks again for tuning in to this episode. We've got more in store for you. And as always, if you'd like to find out more about my work, you can find me at carolinswora.com. See you soon.